Okay. Folks, you can clap all you like. You're still going to have to listen to it. Chairman, my lords, elected representatives, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I imagine a good few of you listening to this are expecting me to start with the words, looking back 100 years. Well, I don't want to start looking back. I want to look the other way. So let me use these words instead. Looking forward 100 years, what will our descendants think of us? Will they think as kindly of us as we think of Edward Carson and of his generation? Will we be honoured? Will we be celebrated and cherished as he is? Will history say that we rose to the challenge the way he did to his challenge? I truly hope so, because it is what I want for this party, of course, but also for this country and for everyone who lives here, and I mean everyone. I'm appealing today to Protestants and Catholics, to Jews and Muslims, to members of all faiths and none, to men, women, urban, rural, Chinese, Indian, Eastern European. This appeal is to everybody. The Ulster Unionist Party is not a religious organisation. We are not just a party for Protestants. We recognise that more people than ever in Northern Ireland actively embrace the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom, which of course includes the freedom to practice your religious beliefs. That is us. I see us as a pluralist party. I see us as a progressive party, but above all, a political party, and one that everybody can look to for a positive alternative to what is on offer today. Because that's what's needed today, a credible alternative. Edward Carson didn't shy away from what was needed. He didn't shrink from a challenge. He didn't squander opportunities. But what about us? We don't have to speculate if Edward Carson would approve. He told us exactly how to measure our success or failure in a speech to the House of Commons in 1920. Looking forward to a government at Stormont, he said this: "They must forget faction and section. If Ulster does what I ask of her, and what I hope and believe she will do, in setting up an example of a precedent of good government, fair government, and a government not for sections or for factions, but for all, her example may be followed." I like that vision of a government not for sections or for factions, but for everybody. It takes us right to the heart of what I want to achieve in politics: the end of sectarianism. Sectarianism has lasted longer than the Troubles. Think about that for a second. Sectarianism still responsible for deaths and for injuries. Sectarianism dictating the pace at which we move to a truly post-peace process situation. Sectarianism holding back the economy, education, health and housing. I want the Ulster Unionist Party to tackle that enduring legacy of our Troubles. Now, if you are wondering what I believe in, it is social justice. I would like to have a leadership role in building a future that is peaceful, law-abiding, and above all, fair, where everyone gets a chance, and where we show a generosity of spirit when we meet people with a different identity or a different set of aspirations. If you are wondering what I want to target, it's sectarianism, it's multiple deprivation, and it is poverty. And if you're wondering why I am in politics, I'll tell you simply. My father was 49 years of age the day the family business was blowing up. Looking back, it was the last day that he got out of bed with a true sense of purpose in his life. And every day I meet people, particularly young people, who are looking for a sense of purpose in their lives, but are denied it through a lack of employment, through poor health or education, the lack of a decent home. And that's the challenge of political leadership that I have set myself. And be in no doubt There is a crisis in 2012, not the same as 1912. No, the threat to the Union from Irish nationalism has passed for now. Thanks to us, the Ulster Unionist Party, the true inheritors of the legacy of Carson and of Craig. So, do you think we might just relax about that for a minute and concentrate and discuss some contemporary issues? Because there is a crisis. Ask the unemployed if there's a jobs crisis. Ask parents of underachieving children if there's a crisis in education. Ask the homeless if there is a housing crisis. Ask any nurse if there's a crisis in the health service. And ask the tens of thousands of people who don't bother voting anymore if there's a crisis in politics. The Ulster Unionist Party says, yes, there is. And Edward Carson had an answer to the crisis of 1912. He made a pledge and he formed a team, and that sounds like a plan to me. So let us do that. Let's stand up proudly, boldly and fearlessly and state what we stand for and ask every citizen of the country to join our team and fight for what is best for Northern Ireland and for its people, and I mean all of its people. We need a roadmap for the way ahead for the next generation. It's a map that shows where we want to go and identifies the best route to get there. And there will be an inconvenient truth along the way. Namely, it will take a long time to get there, and that's a hard message for people. After 35 years of violence and 18 years on from the ceasefires, you can't expect anybody to be happy to be told it might take another 10, 15, 20 years to really fix some of our problems. But that is an inconvenient truth. So we must manage transition with short-term steps of delivery and steps of hope. The roadmap must show how we will end up with better, like a single system of education which allows children to develop as they would in any normal society, but without fear or prejudice to their faith. Achieving that balance, of course, is a major challenge, but there are already two fundamentals I think we agree upon. One, sharing is the first step. And two is that if our children are educated separately and therefore only meet in a meaningful way in their late teens, long after lasting friendships have been formed, we do little to tackle the separateness that is the breeding ground for mistrust and sectarianism. It is an inconvenient truth that it will take time to create a truly normal society where everybody mixes, particularly in housing and in education. But I want that, and I want normal government as well, and better government. And I have a very simple request. Give us the opportunity, and we will deliver better. Give us the chance, and we'll lead a government that puts common sense at the heart of everything government does. Give us the opportunity, and you'll see an administration that won't tolerate wasting time trying to justify the current system when you would be better served if we made the system better. I want government that detests waste, whatever it may be, in money, resources, but above all, in people's life chances. The greatest sin of any bad government is that it tolerates lost opportunities for its people. I see those lost opportunities every day. You do too. 63,000 people seeking work, children yearning for the education they deserve, the victims of terrorism, some who have waited so long, they're no longer focused on themselves or even on their children. They're now wondering if it might just be possible for government to do something for their grandchildren. Well, I think we can. I want a government focused on producing results. This mandate, we will focus the administration on a better way of doing government, as we did in the last 10 days by calling for an economic plan B in the wake of the F.G. Wilson disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, my first close-up view of government came when I joined the Victims' Commission. It wasn't a pretty sight. There was then, and there remains today, an obsession with the inputs and the processes of government. Now, the business people in this room will tell you don't spend money on unnecessary inputs. You don't build a factory or buy raw materials or employ staff unless you think you've got a half-decent chance of manufacturing something people are actually going to buy. And frankly, the Stormont bill of goods is pretty thin. If the Ulster Unionist Party were given the chance, we'd refocus government on the outputs and the outcomes. We'd give you a vision of what success looks like, and we'd invite local communities to use the resources of government to make it happen in their area. It's a simple shift from writing strategies, which sit way up here, to implementing action plans which deliver on the ground. The debate has moved on. It's not about where we are governed from anymore. It is Belfast, get over it. The debate now is what sort of government do you want? 18 years after the ceasefires, 14 after the Belfast Agreement, I'm in politics because as a journalist, then a businessman, and then a victims commissioner, I see political failure. Nobody talks about a peace dividend anymore because nobody really got one. One example. More of our children live in poverty today than when we achieved devolution, an unexpected and deeply unwelcome situation. Many of those children have at least one parent in work, so you cannot point a finger at the families. If the Ulster Unionist Party were in charge of the office of the First Minister, we wouldn't promise to eradicate it all at once. It's not possible, but we would set the sort of target that is currently missing. We'd agree an absolute income level that we didn't want any family falling below. We'd add in 2 specific measures of deprivation, and then we would target that sector. Not the whole answer, doesn't help everybody, but it does tackle those who are most in need. It's a clear, common sense action plan. The whole debate about how to fix Stormont is focused on numbers. How many MLAs, how many government departments, how long should the term be, how many jobs can any one politician hold down? Well, I'll tell you what to think about that in a moment, but there's no point tinkering with the numbers if you don't also change the culture. Those numbers are inputs, and frankly, 18 MLAs could probably achieve as little as 108 if we don't refocus on the culture and delivery on the ground. So we need 2 things. We need less input, but we need a lot more output over here. So for the record, here's how we would change Stormont and why. In 1998, there were groups supporting politics, groups wedded to violence, and groups trying to ride the 2 horses. So to get everybody going forward politically, you had to create a large set of institutions so everybody got a share. It was designed to be inclusive government, not necessarily efficient government. Now, those arrangements were always meant to be transitional. How could you possibly justify jobs for the boys in 2012 with 63,000 people looking for work? You can't. So what would we do? Well, with too many MLAs, of course. So we could take the first step, lose 12 if we go with a reduction from 18 to 16 Westminster constituencies. But let me stress that's just the next step. It's not the end game. And if we're going to stick with the 18 constituencies, we need to negotiate another way to cut numbers, but in a manner that improves the efficiency without corrupting the principle of inclusion that underpins devolved government. We would also reduce the government departments down to 8, including OFM, DFM. Now, that's a number based on our analysis of the situation. It's not just plucked out of thin air. But to be clear about the implications, don't think that means we'll be taking a knife to the number of civil servants in the current government departments. Fewer departments does not mean a night of the long knives for the civil service. It would run totally against my view of good government to put civil servants on the dole because we want to rebalance our economy. If the public sector is comparatively too big, then grow the private sector and grow the social economy. In other words, create the space where people can swap jobs, not lose employment. There are already too many lost opportunities. And I want to pause just to say that the Ulster Unionist Party gets the social economy, the so-called not-for-profit sector. We're talking about services like childminding. Now, some people are unemployed not because they don't want to work, but because the cost of private sector childcare is prohibitive. There's £12 million currently ring-fenced in the executive budget, so let's use some of that to create an affordable option which liberates the individual currently trapped on benefits without damaging the private sector. We would, in short, maximise the potential of the social economy because we get it. We remain resolute in our view that the biggest single change to make Stormont a building that delivers rather than just survives is the introduction of an official opposition. And let me nail the big misconception about our view in opposition. It is not about the Ulster Unionist Party looking for a return to majority rule. I cannot see a time when Northern Ireland will not require a cross-community government. So, if we do have an official opposition, whoever it is, they will work in opposition to a coalition, a cross-community government, made up of the largest parties of the two big blocs. The other misconception is that the Ulster Unionist Party wants money to go into opposition. That's just a cheap shot. Whoever goes into opposition must have the same sort of entitlements, speaking rights, research facilities, which are available to oppositions in Dublin and Cardiff and Edinburgh and in London. A normal democracy offers voters the opportunity to change their government every few years. And in a normal democracy, the official opposition is afforded the maximum opportunity to scrutinise the government and to offer up an alternative. And I want a normal democracy for Northern Ireland, albeit I do accept our particular circumstances dictate that a cross-community coalition government is here to stay. I understand that with two big blocs at the heart of government at the moment, you may well want to argue that that's pretty close to what I'm calling for, but it's not. Because all they do is cancel each other out without any fear of being replaced. And that's what people voted for, conference, that's what they voted for, and this party needs to respect that and understand it. But there is a developing opportunity, a sense on the ground that all of us, I think, are picking up, that people want more than a face-off at the heart of our government. And the challenge I set this party is this: can we persuade people it is time to stop voting because of what people tell you to be afraid of, and it is now time to start voting because of what you hope for? The Way Forward conference must involve more than just keeping Sinn Féin happy. Last week's unemployment figures were a disaster, and the F.G. Wilson disaster followed soon after. It is time for a plan B. It is so bad, I'm sure all of us have either had the experience or know somebody who has that terrible feeling of not having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It is awful. Tens of thousands of our citizens going to bed at night denied the sense of satisfaction that comes from a good day's work, and they crave it. According to the Labour Force survey of 2007, when devolution was restored, the unemployment rate here was 3.7%, the lowest of all UK nations and regions. There were 29,000 people unemployed. 5 years on, the rate, I am afraid, is 8.2, higher than the UK average. That's tens of thousands of lost opportunities. I want the Ulster Unionist Party to fix that. And how do you do it? Well, on the day the latest unemployment figures came out, the Northern Ireland Federation of Small Businesses reported that some 90% of unemployed people who found work in our private sector since 2008 did so either by starting their own small business or by joining an existing one. There is a solution right there. Now, I'm not against foreign direct investment. It's very welcome when it comes with a long-term commitment. But the fact is our private sector is almost exclusively made up of indigenous micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. So there is our economic policy conference. The Ulster Unionist Party will always put local business first. We will be unapologetically, aggressively and openly pro-local business. And let me repeat, I am not against the right type of foreign direct investment, but we need urgent actions. Is there something that we could do that would be more impactful than the current policy of trying to attract 80 million in additional exports over the next 4 years? We have a pot of money which is worth £3 billion a year. It's used by Stormont and by our councils for procurement to buy goods and services for our schools, our hospitals and resources for the public sector. If we were in charge, we would change procurement processes to ensure that our indigenous businesses get as much of that pot as possible. We would stop our small businesses looking enviously at what the administrations in Scotland and Wales are doing and have the Scots and the Welsh asking us, how do you do it? The unemployed in the room and the unemployed watching will note that the current economic strategy commits to creating 25,000 jobs over the next 4 years. What message does that send out? That their government, that evolved, locally led, locally accountable administration we fought so hard to achieve, cannot help over half of you in the foreseeable future. Not good enough. I offer you 7 words to sum up what is wrong with our economy. 7 simple words, conference. Not enough finance, too much red tape. We need money flowing again from our banks to our entrepreneurs. This isn't the time for banks to build up their asset bases at the expense of funding our private sector. This is the time to get cash flowing. And the Ulster Unionist Party wouldn't just look to the banks. Our local pension funds have a role, and so do public-private partnerships, controversial as some of you may think they are. We need to use every lever available to increase access to finance. And it is also, of course, time to cut red tape and bureaucracy holding back businesses. If the Ulster Unionist Party had responsibility for the economy, that is where we would focus. This party led the charge on corporation tax. It's our idea. Now, we never claimed it would be a silver bullet for the economy, but it was and remains a potential game changer, particularly in the face of new European regulations which will force InvestNI to change how it works. Well, as I speak, the battle for devolving the power to vary corporation tax may not be lost, but no one is arguing that it's going particularly well. I note the First and Deputy First Ministers were in Downing Street again this week and again emerged with no agreement. So it is time for a plan B, and we have one. What about focusing only on the small profits rate, formerly called the small business rate? Give us the power, and we will help our indigenous small businesses by cutting the small profits rate and helping local people continue to do what they do best, invest in and grow their own local businesses. Also, we don't need to reduce the tax all in one go. It can be phased in and it can be pre-advertised to allow Invest Northern Ireland to go and attract the new foreign direct investment on the ground before the new tax rate kicks in. I've listened to the reports on the discussions with Treasury. I'm not hearing any plan B. And remember the prize. It's tackling lost opportunities. It's creating jobs with more people with money to spend and fewer needing welfare. And if the problem with the tax is political rather than economic, well, then we have a plan C. Bring down the small profits rate across the whole of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland will take disproportionate advantage from such a move. Whatever happens at those corporation tax negotiations between the Executive and the Treasury, for the sake of the economy, I urge our local team not to walk away without a commitment to large-scale infrastructure projects. I urge the team representing us not to leave the table without a cheque, without a commitment to £200 to £300 million a year as a short-term game changer for our construction industry. In short, conference, there is more than one way to close the economic gap. Ulster Unionists would also close the ridiculous gap between asking for advice from experts and acting on it. Professor Richard Barnett was asked to review economic policy and reported back in September 2009. His group recommended we set up a single department of the economy. Today, 22nd of September 2012, 3 years on, it still hasn't happened, even though no one disagrees with the idea. All that's changed is that the dole queue is considerably longer than it was 3 years ago, with lost opportunities. Earlier this month, Kate Barker, who chairs the Economic Advisory Group, set up by the Department of Enterprise, said it was time to hold the executive's feet to the fire of delivery. She is singing our tune, conference. It's time for action plans, not strategies. It's time for every plan A to have a plan B, and if we cannot generate jobs, then let's generate apprenticeships, up to 40,000, according to the FSB. We need a plan B so Invest Northern Ireland doesn't have to hand back tens of millions of pounds. It's easy. If there's a plan A, form a plan B. And as a townie, let me reassure the farmers in the room, the agri-food sector, they can stand easy. I appreciate your contribution to our economy, a constant over 100 years and more. I asked a local food entrepreneur recently if there was a limit to how far he could expand his business. He told me the story about McCain's chips. We've all seen them in all the frozen compartments of every supermarket. The McCain family were farmers in Canada, and they were forced by necessity to diversify and find themselves a little niche market. Today, their turnover annually is measured in the billions of dollars. That is the potential for our agri-food sector. And let's think bigger in tourism as well. And I acknowledge we have had some successes from our time, our place, but key strategic fault lines still remain, conference. Too many tourists arrive on this island flying into Dublin rather than into Belfast. So if we were in charge of tourism, we would back a new route development fund, say $5 million over 3 years, to pump prime new air routes, including the Middle East. We would also consider clawbacks for failure to deliver. We would bring also a new strand to the tourism offer, what I call human heritage, celebrating and promoting the incredible number of people from Northern Ireland who have made a global impact. 17 US presidents whose roots can be traced to Northern Ireland and the Ulster Scots tradition. Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. Francis Hutchinson, philosopher. And after the great summer of sport we've just enjoyed, or endured if you prefer, what about the sports people, the George Bests and the Danny Blanchfleurs, the Willie John McBrides and the Mike Gibson, Mary Peters and all the Olympians and the Paralympians, Rindy Monaghan, Barry McGuigan, Fred Daly, Darren Clark, Graham McDowell, and of course, Rory McIlroy. The list isn't quite endless. It's not quite endless, but the marketing opportunity is. It is a lost opportunity to market our greatest tourism asset. So the Ulster Unionism tourism slogan wouldn't be our place, our time. It would be our place, our time, our people. And by the way, here's a thought on joined-up government, which is itself something we need to be much, much better at. We're giving some of the major sports teams many millions of pounds to improve their grounds, including the Irish Football Association, and that's great. Now, the IFA will move their headquarters to Windsor Park when the stadium is redeveloped. So why don't we negotiate to buy their current HQ at 20 Windsor Avenue? It's the old home of Thomas Andrews, and the staircase there is the inspiration for what we've covered up behind us. So the home can be part of Titanic Belfast. It could also become the much-needed football museum that we need to celebrate and commemorate what we affectionately know as our wee country. let me turn to the future of the Union. The business guru Charles Handy tells the story of a particular type of frog. He says if you put this frog in a pan of cold water and very, very slowly bring it to the boil, the frog will die because it doesn't spot how the environment around it is changing, and not in a good way. And that's a lesson for unionism in 2012. Having seen off the threat of Irish nationalism, it would be careless, to say the least, to ignore the new threat emerging from elsewhere. Let me give you a small example of how the Union is changing. In 1939, Neville Chamberlain took the UK to war with Nazi Germany, a regime which was trying to invade us. Chamberlain was a Member of Parliament for Birmingham. In 2012, Birmingham Edgbaston is represented by somebody of German origin. Gisela Stuart, a German-born member of the Labour Party, democratically elected by the people of Birmingham. Nobody saw that coming in 1939. Neither did they see a situation where the population of England's second city would be moving rapidly to a position where the majority are non-white and have their roots in Asian and other ethnicities, and where they're more comfortable defining themselves as British rather than English. Now, the implications of this new environment will ripple out as the debate on Scottish independence develops. And as good citizens of the UK, we need to find meaningful ways of engaging that new generation of British citizen, a generation with whom we don't share a long cultural, political and military history, people who will not necessarily bond with us because of our contribution to the armed forces in the two world wars, who know little, perhaps, of the 36th Ulster Division at the Somme. Of course, the 36th Ulster Division was formed by men who were willing to lay down their lives for Ulster, the men who formed part of the 250,000 who signed Ulster's Solemn League and Covenant. But in 1912, they had little idea the environment would change so quickly and so drastically that they would end up laying down their lives in another place and for another reason, fighting at the Somme alongside so many Irishmen in the 16th Irish Division. So we need to connect with a new generation of Britain. We need to engage with them, tell them our story, understand how they view the Union, and inform them that the Ulster Unionist Party has over 100 years in delivering the sort of government that they seek, a government that's fair, tolerant, and respectful of all traditions. I was born as a unionist. I was taught values, including something as trivial and yet fundamental as waiting for the national anthem after the last show at the cinema instead of bolting for the exit. I was brought up to believe in the importance of honouring obligations and responsibilities rather than simply my rights, of earning money, not just borrowing money, of contributing, not just taking. Republicans try to brand unionism as reactionary. I say it is not Ulster Unionism. Ulster Unionism is open, it is liberal, it is progressive. And if we're going to look back this centenary year, let's look back even further than 100 years. Look at the values of Francis Hutchinson, born in Saintfield in 1694, one of the most influential thinkers in Western civilization. He promoted the Enlightenment, he supported the individual over any sect or section of society, but he also encouraged the individual to focus on his or her responsibilities as well as their rights. His thinking informed the French Revolution, American independence, and yes, also the United Irishmen. Look at the values of Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States of America and one of their most influential. His parents came from Carrickfergus in the 1760s, and he led the drive that brought America the Democratic Party, and with it an end to government by the elite. Now that's a political philosophy that I can support. I want to cover two more areas before I close. Dealing with the past and education, both are keys to enabling our society to move forward with all boats rising on the devolution tide. In education, I believe that we have a choice. Allow the debate to stay focused on the contested ground of post-primary transfer, or we can move on to a bigger debate. Now, some will have heard me say in the past, we need to start asking a different question of our children. Instead of asking, how intelligent are you? and measuring it purely in terms of academic ability in maths and English and science, we should be asking them, in what ways are you intelligent? And embracing the full range of a child's talents, academic, vocational, sporting, artistic. It's thinking, by the way, inspired by Professor Ken Robinson from Liverpool. Well, since I started talking that way, I've heard others use the same phrase, although some substitute the word clever for intelligent, others use the word smart. One is the current education minister, the other is Bishop Donal McEwen. It suggests to me there is more room for agreement than we might think superficially. Now, you've heard Danny on our position paper in education. I add just 2 points. Firstly, every year, some children, our children, leave school without basic numeracy and literacy skills. Lost Opportunities Conference. How on earth do we expect them to fulfill their potential, to get the job that they're worthy of, the home they seek, the lifestyle of their choice, without the ability to read and write? One small suggestion: there is a scheme we could import from the United States. It is called Book Buddies. Primary school children spend time with older people, under controlled conditions, of course, in folds. The older people talk and read to the youngsters, and the outcomes, which are all measured, show that literacy levels blossom among the youth and medication intake amongst the older people drops. And why? Because they have found a new sense of purpose in their lives to get them out of bed. It's a win-win. And by the way, I sent the Book Buddies details to the Education Minister months ago. I'm still waiting for a reply. If we had responsibility for the Department of Education, we'd look to imaginative solutions, like Book Buddies, to break the cycle of underachievement. And we would argue for funds outwith the education budget, including the £80 million in the Social Investment Fund and Europe's Peace 4 that Jim referred to earlier. Secondly, I don't think anybody takes a university degree and then goes on to take a postgraduate certificate in education because they expect that after 4 years in the classroom they can retire as millionaires. They do it because they believe in it, so let us free them up from this increasingly high accountability and low trust environment. Let teachers teach. Let teachers teach, and let children learn, not least about themselves, who they are and what they might become and do for a new Northern Ireland. For too many, the Troubles have given rise to nothing but lost opportunities. Now, if we are to tackle the issue of dealing with the past, we have to accept there's much more to the challenge than truth and justice, important as that is. There are all those lost opportunities in education and employment, in health, mental and physical, in savings and pensions, in short, in the quality of life. And the legacy of the past is everywhere, and it emerges most poisonously in sectarianism. And if we're going to deal with sectarianism, we must build a shared future. And that doesn't mean everybody has to lose their identity. It doesn't mean you cannot wear your sports team's top to the pub. It means changing the sign at the pub that reads "No football jerseys" to "All team shirts are welcome." It's about generating the sort of spirit of generosity that we saw recently from the Royal Black Institution in their statement. It's the spirit of generosity that Cardinal Sean Brady demonstrated when he spoke to some of us at Ulster Unionist headquarters earlier this month. He was there along with leaders of all the main churches. The Cardinal chose the Queen and her visit to Dublin as an example of generous, open leadership. And that leaves the narrower but important ground of truth and justice. But what we have yet to agree is what we're trying to achieve and for whose benefit. Currently, we examine specific incidents in forensic detail. We have public inquiries, a police ombudsman, historical inquiries team, and coroner's courts. It adds up to an incomplete and imperfect set of processes. But worse, as the files that get opened are state files, and the witnesses called tend to be the state's representatives, it's deeply imbalanced, And it is actually serving to rewrite history, painting the state and its agents and its officers as the villains. And I say no to that conference. That's a red line for us. Full stop. I say the Ulster Unionist Party has absolutely no problem saying thank you to the RUC and thank you to the UDR. Whatever needed fixed in this country in 1968 or 69, no one needed to die. The legacy also leaves Republican ex-prisoners at the heart of government, while the loyalist counterparts feel politics and politicians like us have left them behind. Well, listen, I will help any ex-prisoner and any associated prisoner group if they are genuine about using their commitment and their energy positively for the benefit of their community. I want the paramilitary groups to go away, and I want ex-prisoner groups to go away too, to become community groups, and I do acknowledge that this journey has begun. But I question, how healthy is it for somebody to define themselves primarily as an ex-prisoner 18 years after the ceasefires? I want them to tell me what they want to be, not what they were then. But I also hear what ex-prisoners say about not being able to go away. We, the politicians, made commitments in the Belfast Agreement, and some linger unfulfilled in 2012. I promise I will work to close that gap, and again, there's a role there for Peace for funding. We must grow the capacity of our community to move on, Conference. So in conclusion, I am drawn to the words of Isaac Newton, he of the fallen apple. He once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Well, next weekend, we all have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of the giants of unionism. Please do not waste that chance to revisit the thinking of 100 years ago that resonates in Northern Ireland today. So, as I finish, do not applaud me, applaud the giants who offer us their shoulders. Craig, a 6'7" colossus of efficient and effective government, and Carson, the leader. And let me repeat his vision, the vision of a government at Stormont. And this time, let me pitch it as an invitation to the tens of thousands of pro-union citizens who currently see no one or no party to vote for, because if this is their vision, then together we can change this government, change it for Carson's vision of a Stormont set up to provide a good government, a fair government, and an honest government. A government not for sections or for factions, but a government for all. That was his vision then. That is my vision today. And that is the Ulster Unionist vision always. Thank you.